My name is Bob Newcomb, and I live in Tualatin, over on Cheyenne Way. I'm a member of the Historical Society, along with my wife Kathy, and we've lived here in Tualatin for approximately 17 years, 18 years I guess it is now, so quite a while. I had just gotten out of high school, and I was 18 years old, and in those days there was the draft in force, so that I was actually drafted into the Army. And that was interesting because my understanding is that in order to get into the Army Air Corps at that time, particularly if you were going to be a member of an air crew, you had to volunteer for that. It was basically initially as an aerial gunner for a B-17. And that's what I was doing. I was training, always in training. Those 2 years I was in the Army, it was basically a training session for a long time. I must say, well, not all of that was in training because of the fact that the war ended in August '45. After that, I was no longer in training in that capacity. I was in other operations there.
How did you pass the time when you weren't training or having fun?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that there was much. I don't remember very much time. We were in training most of the time. They were always keeping us busy doing one thing or another. As far as leisure time goes, we did have leisure on the base. Hardly any place to go outside of the base where I was located. But well, they had entertainment on the campus. They'd have movies occasionally, and they had a kind of a recreation place where you could go and sit down and write letters, read books, what have you. They had things of that nature to do. They had dances, which in those days were jitterbug dancing, and they had actually some big-time bands that would come to the bases and perform.
Jack Brosy. Jack, of course, the nickname. John Florin Brosy is the name that the Navy used for me. They drafted. The draft was quite hot and heavy then, and kids were being drafted either on their 18th birthday or on the day they graduated from high school, which meant in my case I would have been drafted 6 months before graduation, and I didn't particularly want to be drafted to begin with, and I certainly didn't want to miss out on my last year of high school. And they sent me to Oregon State University, which is I had to be in the Army, in the service. I had to be in college in order to join the Navy program, and in order to be in college I had to get out of high school. So my first day was a little hectic. I did all those things in one day. I quit high school, got permission to go to college, enrolled in college, and joined the Navy on the day before I was scheduled to be drafted. So I became an Oregon State student and a Navy candidate, officer candidate, all at the same time.
What was your most memorable experience during the war?
During the war, I suppose it would have been a football game or a basketball game or a competition of some sort. They tried hard, the Navy tried hard to give us a college experience, and in some cases they succeeded. I went to a school called the University of Idaho Southern Branch in Pocatello, which is now Idaho State, and they tried very hard to make it a college experience. We had 400 Navy trainees. We were apprentice seamen, but we were midshipman trainees, and there were 12 civilians in the school at the time, along with 400 men, mostly from Oregon State, who were in officer training. But it was very similar, as similar as they could make it to a college experience. It was very interesting, and our sports were important. They tried to 6 o'clock in the morning, calisthenics, that was considered sports. and we ran obstacle courses and cross country and so forth. So I'd say probably the sporting side of it, and speedball, football, this type of thing. That was the most exciting thing we did. Of course, I was in different schools and different types of training throughout the 3.5 years that I was in school.
In May of '42, the 6th of May, I went into the service. Took us up to Fort Lewis by train, and then down to Abilene, Texas, to the MRTC, Medical Replacement Training Center. Medics were always looked down on. So we were in the old brick building and didn't have the fancy things they had over in the main part of the new Fort Sam. And we went on maneuvers then, after we'd been there a short while, down in Louisiana, swampland, and it was hot and very high humidity. I sweat my pants through clear down to the knees. I haven't done it since then. So lo and behold, come the fall, they said, well, we're going to move. We went up to Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, out of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and so we went on maneuvers there in January, which is up to Upper Michigan Peninsula, and there we got it 40 below zero. The pay was $30 a month, 25 of it would go home, 5 of it go in your pocket. And then when I got to be a baker, I jumped up to $36 a month, so I got $11.
For you is how you kept in touch with your family at home, since you were.
Oh, we had
sounds like you were going all over Europe by truck and through all these.
They had very good mail service, and they also had the V-mail. You'd write that, they'd microfilm it, send it home, and reprint it, send them. It was a single sheet, and it said V-mail on it.
Female, I think.
Yeah, but I wrote quite a few letters, and they would censor them, but I never had a problem with it. And
so we saw an ad about going into the military and going to air mechanic school at Chanute Field. And being resourceful, we thought that'd be great, because then we could work with the airlines if we lived through the war. Because the war had not started yet in our part, but the situation was already in, the Germans had already invaded Poland and all that. So we got in the Air Force. We went to Fort Missoula, Montana, and were sworn in. Gunner jumped down and grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled my earphone out of the ways and hollered in my ear, "There's fire, fire, fire!" And so I just punched all of the buttons to bail out, and we began to get out of there. And we got out of it, and it went down and it blew up. And that mission was so late in the day that the sun had actually set by the time I hit the ground. And I immediately started running into a lot of trees there about a quarter mile away. The people that were up in the village up above us started running down the hill, and I figured I was inside of Germany somewhat. I didn't know exactly how much, but they didn't look too friendly, and so I got into the trees and just kept going. And it took me some time to get to where I was really sure that I could know that I was inside of France. Had to get across what appeared to be a border guard line, because there was German guards marching up and down on it, and I got through there. Some guy come riding by me on a bicycle that looked like he was trying to size me up, and I had kind of rearranged my uniform by cutting my flying suit off just below the pockets so that it would look like a short coat, and I cut the flaps off of my helmet and rolled it up so it looked like a kind of a tam with a fur collar around the top. And he looked at me kind of strange, and then he went on into a little village that was ahead of me, was that where I was walking, and on a little narrow country road, and I glanced down to the side as I got about to where I had seen him go, and here he was down there a little ways with the door open in a garden back of his house, and he was motioning for me to come down there. So I figured, well, there's only one of him and one of me. I'll go down and see what he has to say. I need some help anyway. And so I went down there, and he brought me in, and we got to talking. It turned out he taught English in a school, so he could talk English, and we talked a little bit, and I found out he was connected with the French underground, and walked south myself, and next thing I knew I had Germans all around me, and so I got captured, and then I just showed them my identity and pretended to ignore everything else they said, and then they started searching me, and they searched and searched, and pretty soon they found that I had some compasses hid in my seams of my clothes, and they found one thing after another that finally identified who I was, and I had my dog tags hanging from my undershirt on just out under my left arm. I didn't have them around my neck, and they said, don't get rid of your dog tags no matter what happens. If you do get caught, why, that's it, but at least they'll know who you are. And so they knew who I was, so then they called for a motorcycle with a sidecar, and that guy handcuffed me to the sidecar, and he drove like a maniac. I thought, boy, if he kills us, he'll probably run away from it, and I'll be hanging up somewhere in this thing. But we did get into the headquarters where they took me to, and took me in, and of course by that time they had identified who I was, so there's no use being deaf and dumb anymore. And so I just, when I walked into this officer's place where he took me into, I just told him my name, rank, and serial number. That's all I'd tell him. They then proceeded to turn me over to the Gestapo, and the Gestapo proceeded to make life real miserable for me for about 5 months. They tried every questioning thing they could think of, and one even got so mad one day he pulled his pistol out and stuck it between my eyes and backed me all the way across the room while he was shrieking he was going to kill me. He said, your family don't know you're alive, your country don't know you're alive, and you're not going to be alive if you don't tell me such and such and such. And I said, well, I don't know any answers for you for that, just my name, rank, and serial. And that's all I gave him. And made him pretty mad, but he didn't shoot me, so otherwise I wouldn't be here, like I say. But anyway, this going on and on. The Gestapo were an unhappy bunch, and they wanted everybody else to be unhappy too. They enjoyed being mean as a snake, and they had no foreboding of what they might get into with what they were doing, because Hitler was madder than they were, and so it was not a pleasant time for 5 months.
This is about 1964. I was actually completing a college program at Heidelberg College when I was notified by the actually a person in my local church that the local draft board was looking at re-examining my case, and so I ended up actually then also talking to the Air Force. I received an assignment for Vietnam. He had returned, so there was not two of us then involved or in the theater. So that was important for our mother. It was a time for real change, I think, in our family. And to see a younger brother go. He was in the mobile artillery. It wasn't expected, I think, to return, but the year before we had lost a cousin who had been killed or near the Cambodian border. He caught small arms fire. And he was about my age. Actually, he was a little younger than I was. So that was our first cousin who was killed. And so that was the first member of our family that suffered.
Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I got my draft notice and immediately ran to Portland and signed up for the Navy.
What were you doing before you joined the service?
I was in school, and actually I was in my 5th year at Oregon State, and my student deferment had run out. That's how I got my draft notice, even though I was still in school. And then I came up and found out that they were giving tests for OCS, well, all OCSs at Corvallis, so I ran back down there and took the test at the ROTC building in Corvallis, and fortunately got accepted into OCS, Officer Candidate School, back in Newport, Rhode Island. So I finished school, and then in the fall, in August, went to OCS in Newport.
Tell me about your assignment when you were assigned to a ship, or...
My first assignment was to the USS Ranger, and knowing that, or the planning-wise, I had to go through a 4-month training, actually coincidentally back in Newport, Rhode Island, to go to communication school. So I came out there 4 months later as a communications officer on the USS Ranger, and joined the Ranger in Alameda, where it was home ported, in approximately May of 1969.
How did you keep in touch with your family and friends when you were in the Navy?
Family-wise, did a lot of, well, on the shipboard. I actually, once I got to Galveston, it was very easy, because I could fly back and forth from home and certainly talk on the phone a lot. But when I was overseas, you talked about old tape machines. I had an old tape recorder and would send messages back and forth to my parents that way. And then they in turn sent tapes. But of course, nowadays I guess they use the internet quite a bit, and so you don't really lose as much track as we did then. But we would go sometimes up to 2 weeks without getting any mail on board the ship when we were over off Vietnam. The food was excellent. I have no complaints. We had wonderful food the whole time. The only thing that I did miss about the food situation was we didn't have fresh milk when we were overseas, and I've always been a milk drinker and continue to be, but we could not get fresh milk over there. And I remember the first thing I did when I got back to Alameda from Vietnam, got off the ship, got in my car, and there was must have been a Denny's or something right close to the base, and that's when I got back, drove right to that restaurant and went in and told them to bring me the biggest glass of milk that they could bring me. The most memorable holiday on the ship was certainly the one Christmas that I spent on board, and I've always been a big Bob Hope fan. And he actually, with his troop, spent Christmas Eve on our ship and gave his show on the ship that night. So that was quite a celebration. Of my time, just thinking back, I never got tired of. There was a spot we could go up on the island on the ship and watch the planes take off and land on the deck, and I spent an awful lot of time just watching that. I never got tired of it. A lot of people would do that and put plugs in their ears because it was so loud, but I didn't even do that. I just really enjoyed the noise and the activity.
We went to Fort Sam Houston for basic training, is where all the medical training folks are. And I have to honestly say the medical corps as a group isn't necessarily gung-ho Army. Most of the people in my time were paid back, like I was, student nurses, student docs, things like that. Also conscientious objectors came in as the nursing assistants and CRN type of thing. So we had to pass our state boards before we actively went. So we graduated in May or June and then took our state boards. So October of 1966 is when we went to Texas for our basic training. My first assignment after that, I asked for the West Coast and I got sent to Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., which is the west coast of the Atlantic Ocean. And there, I was on the neurosurgery, plastic surgery ward, and almost everybody in that unit was from Vietnam, post-Vietnam injuries. And of course, the young nurses all knew that we would get assigned to Vietnam. And we figured out, my friend from nursing school was with me this whole time. And we had another gal from our nursing class too. She wasn't, was she a Walter? I can't remember, it doesn't matter. Anyway, we knew that all the nurses would be sent to Vietnam. So if you came back from Vietnam with less than 90 days left of your contract with the Army, you got an early out. So we came back with a 72-day early out. So we actually volunteered to go to Vietnam because we knew we were going to be sent anyway. And so we wanted the early out. And that's how we got over to Vietnam. Of the hospital, so we could go directly across the street. And this street called Trang Hung Dao was one of the busiest streets you've ever seen. I mean, it was a foreign pedicabs and carts and motorcycles and cars, and there was nobody there. So we had to walk around the hospital, and we found out later there were snipers all around us that could have just shot us all. And then at that point we had to wear white uniforms. That's why we called it Walter Reed's. After TET we didn't. We started wearing fatigues. And so we got over to them, to the hospital, and they had everybody called in, but they couldn't get anybody into us because we were right in Chowan, which was where, in Saigon, a lot of the firefighting was starting. And the mortars were going over. And so we hadn't had that direct contact in Saigon directly. So the chief nurse sent everybody back to bed, like they're going to sleep, and she said, Pat, you stay and you do triage. Triage is where people come in, you decide where they go. We were a very, very small unit. We had, I think, 3 surgical units. And as soon as everybody left, of course, they got people in. And I made some pretty strong determinations and had to decide what triage is. The docs were there, but they were all in surgery, and who was going to be next for surgery, who should we let stay because they're going to die anyway, who needed immediate care. And I did some things nurses don't tend to do anymore. Well, yeah, I think they do, but it depends on where you are. Put a chest tube in so someone's lungs didn't collapse, and prioritize the patients. And I was there for 12 hours without a break. Because they forgot I was there. The chief nurse forgot I was there. And I was doing such a fine job. But the interesting part of Saigon and TET, all of the corpsmen, all of the doctors had flak jackets on. Because later we found out we were a targeted site because they thought the North Vietnamese wanted the medical supplies, which they did. For some reason we didn't have that. But none of the female nurses had flak jackets. Which was interesting. And so something came up, and one of my corpsmen said, Lieutenant, not to worry, if we get overrun, which would mean the North Vietnamese would be coming to the hospital, I'll shoot you. And I said, no, you won't. They don't want to take me with them. Have you lost your mind? So I said, no, I don't want to be shot by my own corpsmen. So I said, I'll tell you what, we had an elevator. I said, I'll go in the elevator and stop it between floors after we get the patients taken care of, but don't shoot me. And I had that happen in Cu Chi too, where they said we're going to get overrun in one of the corps. I said, no, I've been through this before. Don't. They're not going to take me. But that was the mentality, and you hear these doctors and corpsmen around. I didn't know how to shoot a gun. I mean, we had basic training, and we were all terrible shots. I mean, I was so bad. The drill instructor said, Lieutenant, if you have to shoot anybody, turn it around and throw it at them because you can't hit anything. I really really loved my guys. I would sneak things from them from the mess hall. We had a cake coming in. We had a cake there for the general coming, and I took it and gave the guys a great thing, and the chef, the mess hall people knew who did it. I don't know why. And they said, you have to make a cake. I said, are you talking about me? I don't know how to make a cake in the first place. So I did. I made this cake with tuna fish oil. We had lots of tuna fish. It was disgusting, but it looked really good. I said, you give this to the general and you'll die, but here's your cake. And the guys really appreciated it. They said, oh, that was really nice. They said, Lieutenant, you're going to get court-martialed. I said, probably. So, you know, you have all those events no matter what you do in the world. You have to find the humor in things, and really and truly, I did a lot of illegal things, which I probably won't talk about. I flew some helicopters that we weren't supposed to fly, and realized that if we'd gotten shot down, medical insurance wouldn't cover.
My name is Dale Potts, and I served in the Navy from 1966 through 1970. I was very fortunate that I was actually had been drafted into the Army, and I'd gone through my physical. I had 17 days to report, and what had happened, I'd applied for Navy OCS, Officer Candidate School. I was in school, and I got into grad school, so I told the Navy to put it on hold, and the deferment took my deferment away, draft board. They took a whole bunch of master's people's deferment away, and so I called the Navy and asked, please put me back on the list for Officer Candidate School. And I quit school, and I was getting my affairs in order, and then the Navy called with 7 days ago that I was accepted in the Navy's Officer Candidate School. Actually like a dream in a way, because I was the public affairs officer on an aircraft carrier. And my work basically was, it was like a small city. And we had a daily newspaper we put out so the guys could know what was going on. We had a first television station ever on an aircraft carrier I was in charge of. I was in charge of a newspaper. We did a lot of, when the press came aboard, I was in charge of taking care of them. They did the movie Tora Tora Tora, where they used our ship as the attack carrier from the Japanese fleet for that movie Tora Tora. And so they came aboard and they painted, put the Japanese symbols all over the ship. And they did a movie called, a television series called Get Smart. And since we were in Long Beach, they used us for that particular ship. They had what was the guy's name from Get Smart? Don Adams, the actor. But the series was, he was a Navy reservist, and he was doing 2 weeks active duty. And he was trying to find some spies or something. It was a silly movie, but they used us for the ship. The lady who was married to Ronald Reagan, his first wife, she was had adopted our ship. So a lot of times when we would go out, she'd be with us. When we had things at Christmas time, movie stars would come aboard. Edgar, Charlie McCarthy, Edgar Bergen came aboard. We were picked to pick the Apollo 8. The manned lunar ship, the first one to go around the moon. We were picked to pick that up, and that we had an international press aboard for that. Then we were asked to go to take the copy of that capsule around South America on a tour.
I was a total of about 11 or 12 years active duty, and then I have some reserve time. I'm still in the reserves.
Okay. So you enlisted?
Initially, I was drafted into the Army, but I had a 4-year degree, and so I made a deal with a recruiter to get into the flying business in the Air Force. So you could do that at that time.
So you flew airplanes?
I was a navigator. That's what these wings are here, is a navigator. I was a navigator in a C-130, just what it looks like, 4-engine turboprop here. And so I have about 4,000 flying hours in Hercules. However, I did learn how to fly airplanes, but not military airplanes. I still fly to this day. I have my own airplane. My job as a navigator was to tell the pilots which direction to go out primarily over the ocean, although at times there were no navigational aids, like out over deserts like in Saudi Arabia and Africa. There were no navigational aids. So my primary job was to navigate the airplane across oceans. I was actually there on the last day when we were turning the lights out. One of these airplanes, C-130s, one of my squadron airplanes with my friends in it, got hit with a mortar round right on the nose and blew it up. And then they jumped on another airplane, got out of there. So I was there the very last day. I was in there evacuating refugees from Saigon, and also various general cargo. We were shipping things in and shipping things out till the very last minute. I was also involved in the evacuation of staff and personnel over in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and also, again, like I said, involved with the SS Maagwez incident over in Cambodia. You know what, it was real hard for me and other veterans. These days, when you see a veteran, especially in his uniform, his or her uniform, you go, you know, that's a hero and that's somebody that fought for their country and so on. When I was in Vietnam, we were the enemy because this was a very unpopular war in Vietnam. And so when I got back, I had a very difficult time even getting work. I had a 4-year degree, I had a lot of experience. People wouldn't even talk to me. I lost a lot of friends. You know, it was tough. But one thing I learned, especially like even in my high school, is you never give up. You never give up. So anyway, I made a living at it. I actually had intended to be a college professor, and I'd already made an application to be a professor of geography at Oregon State University. And but my life was changed as a direct result of this.